Literature, poetry. Poetry also experienced a golden age. Famous poets of this time included Abu Nuwas, Abu Tamam, Ibn al-Mu'taz, Ibn al-Rumi, al-Mutanabbi, and al-Ma'ari. The caliphs encouraged poetry as they recognized that words are powerful tools. So these are the very prominent poets of Abbasid era. There are different types of poetry from this era. First is Qasida, early form of poetry, still popular, often very long, used to praise Allah and to display the poet's knowledge. So this is the type of poetry in which the poet is praising Allah in the and displaying his knowledge, the different use of different words to praise Allah. Then the next type of poetry is ghazal, 5 to 12 verses about love and religion. So it can be about love or it can be about religion, and it is not very long. Like Qasida is a long poetry, okay? But Ghazal is not very long, it is 5 to 12 verses only. Then Hita, used for light everyday poems, like very short poems which can discuss anything in the everyday life pattern. Rubai, a type of poem in which each verse is 4 lines long and the first, second, and fourth lines rhyme. So each verse is 4 lines long, and the first, second, and fourth line rhymes. The third, it's not important to rhyme, but it is called rubai from the word ruba, like it is in the pair of like sets of four, four, four. So this type of poem was called rubai. Then Makama, used for telling simple, entertaining stories. So it was the type of poetry, but it was not that much rhythmic as it was in the Rubai, Ghazal, or other. It was like to telling the stories, entertaining stories, and it can be long. Prose. Prose is opposite of poetry. Okay, poetry is mainly used with the rhyming words, but prose is just type of essays or the simple writing which we have. The great writers of the time also wrote stories and academic texts. Abu Hayyan al-Tawhidi wrote books about philosophy. Ibn al-Mukaffa translated Indian fables from Sanskrit into Arabic. He wrote the Kalila Wadimna. So this is like the paragraphs written, and these are the famous prose writers. Al-Jahiz worked in Baghdad at the House of Wisdom. House of Wisdom is Baitul Hikmah, okay? The English name of Baitul Hikmah was House of Wisdom. So Al-Jahiz was a prose writer. He worked in Baghdad at Baitul Hikmah or House of Wisdom. He wrote more than 200 books, but few survived. Like most of his books were destroyed. His most famous work was Kitab al Haywan, the Book of Animals. The book describes many animals and also gives proverbs, traditions, and superstition about the animal. This is an illustration from a Syrian edition of Kalila wa Dimna dated 1354 AD. History and Geography. The most famous historian of this time was Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, born in 823 AD. It is said that he memorized the Quran by the age of 7. Like he was so much intelligent. When he was 7 years old, he was the Hafiz of Quran. He memorized complete Quran. He traveled widely and was known as a great scholar and a teacher. His most famous books were The History of the Nations and the Kings and the Commentary on the Quran. So, Muhammad ibn Jarir al Tabari, he was born in 823 AD and he was a traveler. He used to travel a lot. He was very intelligent person. He was a scholar. He was a teacher, and he wrote a lot of books. And most famous of his books is The History of the Nations and the Kings, and the other one is Commentary on the Quran. Like the first book is about the history of the nations, like the detailed history, and the second one is about Quran. Even before Al Idrisi created his famous map of the world in the 12th century, people in the Islamic State traveled widely. So Al Idrisi was one of the traveler. He used to travel a lot and he created his map. Even before that, in 12th century, Islamic State, the people of the Islamic State, they traveled wildly. A lot of the traveling was done. They traveled to Makkah on Hajj and for trading as well. As a result, they gained knowledge of many countries because they used to move for the trading purpose with the trade caravans. So they were traveling all over the world to the many countries, and they were gaining knowledge about the different countries. Al-Maqdisi traveled all over the Islamic State in the 10th century, observing and recording what he saw. So Al-Maqdisi was a traveler. He traveled almost all over the Islamic State, and he noted down, he recorded each and everything, whatever he saw. He observed a lot and he recorded whatever he saw. He created names for things he observed. In 985 AD, this information went into a book called The Best Divisions for Knowledge of the Regions. So these all observations which he noted down, which he recorded, they became a book it was written in the form of book, and the name of that book was The Best Divisions for Knowledge of the Regions. Geographers, scholars, and ordinary travelers all use the work. There are more editions of this book that you can read. So, not even one edition, there are many editions of this book. And in this book, a lot of information is there about the different parts of the world and the names of the different things which were observed by Al Maqdisi. So, he preserved this all work. In the 9th century, Al Khwarizmi also recorded geographical information in the form of the earth. In the 13th century, Yaqut al Hamawi wrote a dictionary of the countries, which was arranged alphabetically. It described the location and historical significance of the different cities. So, Al Khwarizmi was also a traveler, a geographic person. He wrote geographical information in the book named as The Form of the Earth. That is the name of the book, The Form of the Earth. In the 13th century, there was another person who wrote a dictionary of the countries, and his name was Yaqut al Hamawi. And in that he wrote all the information alphabetically with the alphabets. Like nowadays we have dictionaries which information is written alphabetically, so it is easy nowadays to find out information about any country. So he wrote a dictionary of the countries alphabetically. It described the locations and historical significance of the country, the historical importance of the different cities of the world, especially in the ancient world. This is a stamp depicting Al Khwarizmi. The stamp was issued in the Soviet Union in 1983 to commemorate 1200 years since the birth of the famous mathematician. Al Khwarizmi was a famous mathematician. He was a traveler also. He noticed and observed the mathematical and geographical issues also, science and mathematics. Most of the great scholars at this time studied and wrote in many different fields. For example, Al Kindi was a mathematician and also an expert in medicine, chemistry, and philosophy. Ibn Sina, known as Avicenna in the West, wrote in all fields of science, but he was best known for his work in medicine and philosophy. So there are two main scientists mentioned here. One is Al Kindi and the other is Ibn Sina, Avicenna. In Arabic, he is known as Ibn Sina, and in English books, he is known as Avicenna. So in the Western countries, Avicenna. So they both were great scholars. They were masters in maths and in philosophy, in chemistry, in medicines. Avicenna has also written in all fields of science. Chemistry. The first essentials in chemistry is that you should perform practical work and conduct experiments. For he who performs not practical work nor makes experiments will never attain to the least degree of mastery. So said the father of modern chemistry, Jabir ibn Hayyan. So Jabir ibn Hayyan was a chemist, and he is also known as the father of modern chemistry because he was a great chemist. He is known as the father of the chemistry in the West. West he is known as Jabir, and in Arabic, Jabir ibn Hayyan. He was born in 722 and lived in Kufa. He also discovered a lot of things, a lot of formulas, and these are his words that whenever you are doing the practical work, you are learning more. So, especially in the chemistry, if you are doing the experiments, then you can learn. Otherwise, it is very difficult to be a master in the chemistry. Jabir ibn Hayyan conducted experiments to work out how chemicals combined and reacted with each other. He also built an accurate weighing scale. He was interested in using his knowledge to improve the lives of the people. He distilled perfumes, worked out how to make waterproof materials, found new ways of glazing tiles, and even invented a paper that could resist fire and ink that could be read at night. So these were the discoveries of Jabir ibn Hayyan. He mixed up the chemicals and saw their chemical reactions and did a lot of research about these things. He made a weighing scale. He was interested in using his knowledge to improve the lives of people. So why he was doing all these research? Because he wanted to improve the lives of people. He wanted to make the life of the people easier. He distilled perfumes, the perfume oils are there in many of the plants. So this is done by the process of distillation. So he used that process and made the perfumes. And he worked out how to make waterproof materials. So nowadays we have a lot of waterproof materials. So that was started by Jabir ibn Hayyan. He found out new ways of glazing tiles. So these all he did by the chemical reactions, by mixing different chemicals. He was doing these new inventions, glazing tiles, and even he invented a paper that could resist fire. So fireproof paper that was also invented by Jabir ibn Hayyan. And there was an ink. He also developed or discovered a type of ink that could be read at night. Maybe it's a kind of glowing ink or so, so that could be read at night. Another famous chemist was Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi. He was born in 865 AD in the area now known as Iran. So, Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, he was born in Iran. Like nowadays it is in Iran, at that time it was known as Khorasan. He wrote about all his experiments and set up the first real laboratory. He also classified substances. Classification of substance was also done by Al-Razi. So these were, we can say, the old scientists which are the heroes of Islamic golden age. Al-Kindi was born in Iraq 801 AD. He wrote the book of chemistry of perfume and distillations. So he wrote the book about a complete chemistry of distillation and how to take out the perfumes from the different plants. And here in the picture also you can say Jabir ibn Hayyan teaching at the school at Edessa. Edessa is a place nowadays, it is in Turkey. Okay, and nowadays the name of Edessa is Urfa. Medicine. Ibn Sina or Avicenna in West, he wrote book, The Code of Laws in Medicine. That was the most famous book of the medicine ever written. It was one of more than 200 books written by Ibn Sina. So he wrote more than 200 books, and one of them, which was very famous, was The Code of Laws in Medicine. This is the name of his most famous book. Ibn Sina, okay, sorry, it was translated into other languages and used for many centuries. Ibn Sina was born in 980 AD in the area now known as Uzbekistan. It's a Central Asian state, and Uzbekistan. Now, the name of that state is Uzbekistan. Another great scholar of medicine during Abbasid era was Al-Kindi. Pharmacy. By the ninth century, there were several pharmacies in Baghdad. Pharmacists stored and prepared medicines and made sure that people received proper fresh medicines. Scholars like Sabr ibn Sahal, al Razi, ibn Sina, ibn al Bitar, and al Kindi described medicines and the correct dosage of medicines. So these all people were pharmacists. They prepared the medicines, they stored them properly, and they made them available for the doctors and the patients to be used. Engineering. Most places in the Islamic State were dry with a lot of wind. So, engineers designed and built the first windmills. The energy generated by the windmills was used to lift water out of the ground and to grind wheat. So both purposes were taken by those windmills. One purpose was to grinding the different type of grains, maybe wheat or corn or any taste type of grains, and the other purpose was to lift the water. Like they were making the water available for the crops for the cultivation. Mechanical knowledge was also used to irrigate the fields where the crops grew. So this is a kind of an old windmill. This was developed by those old scientists. Mathematics. Mathematicians in Baghdad studied old Indian and Greek manuscripts on mathematics and then developed the study of mathematics in new directions. So there were mathematicians who were studying the old manuscripts from India and from Greek, and they were developing new type of mathematics, new formulas of mathematics. Al-Khwarizmi, the poet, Umar al-Khayyam, and Al-Kindi were some of the most famous mathematicians of the time. So these three are most famous mathematicians. Al-Khwarizmi, Umar al-Khayyam. He was also a poet, but he was also a mathematician. And Al-Kindi, we have learned a lot about Al-Kindi. He was a chemist, he was scientist, he was physician, he was mathematician. So he also Al-Kindi these were some of the most famous mathematicians of the time. Amongst other things, they introduced a new number system which originated in India. So they were studying maths and they introduced a new number system which was introduced in India, which was sorry originated in India, and they developed it in more profound form. This system is still used today. So even nowadays, that system of mathematical numbers is used.